Hello, and thank you for joining today's Tips and Tricks webinar. Please use the Q&A chat if you have any questions. Today's presenter is Eric Darensett, security engineer out of Southern California. Eric, what do you have for us today?
Hey, thanks, Mark. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. So today I'm going to be covering dynamic access policies using data center objects. Once again, name is Eric Darensett, security engineer out of Southern California, Hawaii region. I was working in Check Point for about 10 years before coming over here. I was in the gaming and hospitality industry. I've been here about 2 years now, and happy to present to you today. So today's agenda, really just going over access policies right now within Check Point, what kind of objects we have, what we use, what a typical access policy looks like, and how there is some level of uh, dynamism to it, but want to talk about how data center objects can really bring you to that next level of automation with a policy and just proper levels of access. Then we'll talk about the brains behind data center objects, which is really the mechanisms that work behind the scenes to have your data center stuff shared with management and the security gateways for enforcement. After that, we'll go through a little data center object creation, management usage, just how that looks. And I did throw in a bonus topic, which are network feeds. So these are also dynamic objects leveraging custom-defined IP and domain lists, which can also be used for access policies. I really like this. I just want to put it in there too. A little different than data center objects. Once again, something that gives a little bit of ability for enforcement outside of just installing policy. And then after that, of course, go into a always fun live demo. So first, kind of looking at a typical access policy. This is obviously a unified policy, so this is used for multiple gateways in one place. But I just wanted to kind of key in on some of the objects you'd see, source destinations and all that. You can see really in here, we've got just network groups, domains, subnets, IP addresses that could be used as sources, same with destinations. We are using some user roles in here, which of course are a little bit more dynamic, which is nice. It gives you less ability to have to modify policy or understand where people are moving from workstation to workstation, network to network. And then we are leveraging here applications, some other objects as part of our URL application control. Allows you to not have to define spaces for let's say Twitter, LinkedIn, the ports that the use services, backend servers, all that stuff. And then, of course, enforcement, data layers. So obviously, take, for instance, an item like production nets. If you are adding more networks to your production, or you have a very much locked down list where you want to have, basically least privilege, the right servers, the right production network talking the right things. This is where our dynamic objects kind of come into play, especially with data centers. So as this thing grows or shrinks, or if new stuff gets added in, besides having to have a request to the firewall team, security team to add an object to that source, then push policy, get all that permission. That's where we're trying to see data center objects in use to help minimize that for utilization. So kind of as I just mentioned, static object rule challenges, as we add new network servers environments, we need to create those objects and firewall policies to then give proper access to those environments. Access policy changes, can be easy or hard depending on, your organization. They, of course, require policy install, which could be a change control, could be done during certain windows. If there's an immediate need for it and you don't have that authorization, it can become, operational challenge. And of course, we want to try to go as fast as business can go. And with dynamic or data center integrations, we really do help to achieve that more. Obviously, cloud is very scalable. Scaling up, scaling down is needed as new workloads are built. These data center objects are part of that integration. We will be talking about both, on-prem and cloud-based data center, environments. Of course, with our environment, we can be hybrid cloud policy, so you can have the same policy enforced across your entire environment. And with these data center objects, once again, it just gives that little additional capability of ease. And security policy can be risky sometimes. There is human error. So if you are making changes or something goes wrong with the policy push, there's always a concerning moments when that does happen. And obviously with dynamic, you're not pushing policy, you're not doing any type of real engagement, which once again just eases some of the complications of the environment. So going into data center objects now, I want to talk first about the brains of data center objects, and that's really our CloudGuard controller. So this is a piece that's been introduced since RD.10. So any new and kind of a supported version of our checkpoint firewalls already have this on there, and they're working kind of under the scenes, both on the management and the gateway side. But just for example, on the management, you have a CloudGuard management controller, and that's really what's brokering the communications between your firewall environment and your data centers to kind of create those data center objects. On the right here, this is just a small number of supported data centers we integrate with. As we go to the demo, you'll see our current offering. But from here, really, the security management is what brokers that communication, and then we'll share the changes that are made from those data center objects as you leverage them in policy with all of your gateways. The gateways themselves have a cloud controller agent or a CloudGuard controller agent on them, and it doesn't matter if they're physical appliances, virtual appliances, in your cloud, in your on-prem data center. It's there, and it'll integrate with those policies. That's one thing about how we do this with our software code. It's pretty much enforceable anywhere as far as the gateways are concerned. So going into that, now that we know kind of what's going on behind the scenes, how do we create data center objects? So this is in our policy base. As you create a new object and you do the imports, we have a data center option there. And then once you click that, you'll see all your data center that you have set up or a new data center. And this list here is really the current offering that we have as far as integrations with these different platforms. And each one's integrated in a little bit different way. We do have a guide for your requirements to connect to it, certain roles or permissions to be brought in. And then we also do have a generic data center option, which is just kind of build your own, structured data set as far as what you define as your own data center. One thing I will note, mentioned on the left here, the Identity Awareness Blade and Identity Web API is needed for data center use. So you have to make sure that those gateways that are enforcing or using data center objects do have those two options enabled. If you do try to push policy with those, it will fail and tell you this exact reason, but that you need these installed. But that's really the way that the communication does work. It leverages our Identity Awareness API to build those objects on the firewall. So that's really how that dynamic enforcement comes in. It's taking those identities and putting them in your environment for use. So right here is just kind of an example of the vCenter object and how it would look as you start to bring in objects in your environment. So bottom right, you'll see just a regular vCenter environment. We've got our data centers. You can see this resource group, Amit there, and the objects that are within that resource group. Going to the upper left now, this is really the view once you decide to choose an object from a data center. You can see it pretty much structures matches the vCenter environment. So if you did bring in the Amit resource group as a object to use in a firewall policy, if as you add new servers into that, it will update that object in the checkpoint firewalls to then allow the same rights and permissions as every other workstation or server in that resource group. And just like everything else, we do log and monitor this. So if you're looking at our regular log environment, you'll see control sessions for the CloudGuard infrastructure as a service as it kind of phones home to update the data center objects. And as you can see here, as they did add this new item, there was that check-in for CloudGuard, and then also a login with identity awareness. This is really how this information is being shared with the firewalls. Essentially the establishment of this server as part of a policy to be used for access. And going to this now, this is really the management object for monitoring. And you'll see when you go into device license information, you'll have a new little option there called CloudGuard Controller, which just gives a little detail about it from a nice UI level, connected data centers, what you have, and then how they're leveraged. So diving into it, you can see with, we still have one data center integrated, which data centers are they, and then also which gateways are enforcing data center objects. So, once you start to try to leverage data center objects in firewall policies associated with gateways, these will start to show up. It will give you a good idea of what you're using. This also just gives you a count of how many objects were imported as part of the policy, and then of course the updates. So this is obviously the first time this was integrated in a very small amount of objects, but it'll give you that information as you go in. So of all the data center objects, there are also a generic data center object, which we have outlined here. So if you are just wanting to build your own data set data structure to share information, you can do so in a JSON method. It is outlined there in that SK, which is available for viewing. From this, essentially, you would host on a secure website or insecure HTTP, HTTPS, a JSON file, which the firewall would check in on, or the CloudGuard management controller to check in on and pull that data, and then essentially create a set for you to use for policies. So it's just outlining what your data center is, what all the objects are, and then pulling it in. This is just really if you have something that is not covered by the current data centers we do support, or you just want to do your own kind of custom sets. But follows the same rules. Once you make changes to that JSON file, at the cadence that the CloudGuard management controller checks in, it'll find the changes, log them, and then send them out to the firewalls for enforcement. And then my bonus item here, network feed. So network feed is not really a CloudGuard controller, but what it is essentially a hosted URL where you can define a set list either through just straight flat file or JSON, a list of IP addresses, domains, wildcard domains that you could use for enforcement on firewall policies. So a little different way, it checks in a different manner. It's not as pretty as far as the way you see things in the management portal, but say you have a business unit that they want to define their own IP address list, or you have your InfoSec team with a whitelist and a blacklist, and you want to enforce it at access control level. This is where you can have them manage those files, those hosted lists through in either an intranet or an external feed that's provided by another security provider to bring into your access policy to either allow or deny traffic. So once again, maybe application unit that wants to very more granularly control which individual IP addresses internally have access to their website. You can say, well, just update your network feed, as your control lists go, and that'll automatically be pushed out to the firewall for enforcement. So a little different, but really, really great. And I'll kind of be showing this in the demo too, how that really works. Before I get to the demo, just want to share two little slides here for information. Serendipitously, there's a CloudGuard controller deep dive coming up next week. So there's the date and the time. It is a Bright Talk. It is hosted by Checkpoint. So if you just search CloudGuard on Bright Talk right now, you can sign up for that. So it's a little bit deeper dive into not just the data center objects, but some of the more automated, integrations that CloudGuard, controller does offer for, data center environments to your firewall enforcement. Even if you can't make this, and if you're watching this later as a recording, these are always available on Bright Talk. So if you just go there after this time, the recording will be there for you to look at. And then also some of the other resources leveraged for this. We have a CloudGuard admin guide, which goes in detail on configuring each data center object. So each data center, how you would go about that, the requirements, what you would need to do on the data center side to create a role needed for access. Generic data center, going over the data structure, how that actually be integrated. And then network feeds are really part of the already 1.10 just environment. So they're there in the admin guide for your use. And that being said, I think we'll hop into the live demo now. All right. So with this, this is kind of a lab environment. And I'm really going to be focusing on these two rules here. We got rule 4, which is leveraging a data center object, which we'll kind of look into. And then rule 3 are some network feeds. So these are really these defined accesses, which we'll look at. And you can see just the difference here. Dynamic objects usually have this little circle there, which is the way that they operate as far as updating their host, where this is a data center object that's more integrated just with the policy itself. But first off, let's look at actual data center object to what's going here. So in this, we kind of saw this in the demo. So going into the view, if we do imports, data centers, you can see these are our data centers that we have already as a capability. And then these are the new data centers that we can bring into the environment. So this is I've set up an Azure lab environment right now. So we'll already kind of look at this. And as I click on this, it actually will pull in all the integrations or all the tagging network groups that are actually in my Azure cloud environment. So you can see here, I was actually leveraging the security tag with security equals gateway. So if I go to tags here, these are all the ones I've defined this one manually, but you can see everything that we have. And you see I actually have the security equals gateway tag selected. And if I click on this option here, you can see right now, here's the IP addresses that are participating in that security gateway tag. So if in the environment, as you spin it up or spin it down, I would imagine there might be an automated process. You tag the workloads as necessary. It will bring these guys in. And actually, I'll show you that right now. So you can see here, we did have 3 IP addresses. I'm going to go into my Azure environment, and this workload, I'm going to tag with that security gateway tag. So under here, get security, gateway, apply this tag. All right. And then the check-in time for the data center objects is 30 seconds. So it'll pull every 30 seconds. You can adjust it. It's more of a internal tweak, but just the standard cadence for that is 30 seconds. If we see Azure Lab, I just wanted to show you too. This is the creation of the data center object. As I mentioned in that CloudGuard guide, there's different rules and requirements needed. But with Azure, you need a service principal authentication, application key. To really bring that in, and then testing connection can be done here. So once you do this, and obviously each one's different, vCenter, AWS, that's where you'll kind of pull that in. I think we have about 30 seconds now, so let's click on this guy again. It looks like it's not updated yet. We'll give that a little more time. And while we do, let's see here. While we wait for that, we'll look at the network feeds. So you can see here above, we have our network feed objects, which are dynamic. And in here, this is kind of similarly defined. As I mentioned, we are feeding from a URL. So this is an internally hosted URL, which I've actually brought up right here just for view. So this is really what I'm putting in this list. And depending on how you set it up, you can have a mixture of, subnets, individual IP addresses, domains. And this is what it kind of really brings into play. And flat list or JSON data types, like I say, could be a mix. Your delineation or delimiters, can be defined as needed. I'm just doing next line, and then if you're commenting out anything, you can leverage that hash. With these feeds, they can be as short as 1 minute or as long as you want. It's a little bit different than data center objects, as I mentioned. So it's kind of in here, and of course, you can always test the feed and really see. And you test it from a gateway level. So can my gateway actually get to this URL to process what they need to process? And it looks like it did, and it found 7 ranges read, which are the 7 that I had defined in there. And let's go back to this, see if we get this guy updated now. Of course, live demo, right? Sure, I made the right changes. So, going back to network feed, as I mentioned, clicking on this, we're not getting any information about the actual stuff that's entailed in here. Like what IP addresses are in there, what's being enforced. I don't know, I can't see. So you can do this from CLI just for confirmation or sanity if you're really needing that. Go to macros. So this right here. You can see this is the I'm pulling the dynamic object information for network feeds. So you can see this one's got a mix of ranges and domains. So you'll see that these do all match that file that I was looking at earlier, as far as the hosted site with 4 different IP ranges and 3 domain related items. I'm going to modify this list as well. I'll add like MSN.com. That's great to say. And you'll see my feed here is actually updated, so we'll give it a little bit of time to let that check in if we do have time during our demo. And while we're waiting for the other dynamic object, as I mentioned, dynamic data center objects do leverage identity awareness. So I'm just running a PDP to look at all the machines that are currently authenticated. And you can see in here, each individual device, we did have 3 initially. So it looks like the other 2 for that Ubuntu have been updated in here. But just taking a look at one of these, it's got the IP address associated with it, the machine as it's associated with the cloud, client type, you can see how it's leveraging the identity awareness API controller to be brought in. And this is how that enforcement gets pushed. That's where the dynamic nature of it comes in. And yeah, it looks like I'm just maybe not waiting for that to update, but it is currently on the new version. This is probably just the nature of the live demo. But those objects have been brought in for that. There's always the idea, okay, well, what happens if I can't get to this website anymore to pull data, or I don't have access to, for whatever reason, my data center connection's gone. With this one, with the data center objects, we do have a set a 1 week, reauthentication cycle. So if you do lose connection, it's going to hold on to this identity for a week, which hopefully is enough time for, the disconnection to be discovered. Of course, all disconnections or failed check-ins are found on the log, which we'll kind of look at. But yeah, they will cease to be there after a week. And then with our dynamic objects, they're going to pretty much perpetuate until the until forever. Basically, if it's not going to pull new data, it's not going to update it, but it's not going to get rid of the current information in there. And as you can see, actually, the MSN that I did add to the website is already updated and being used for enforcements in that rule base. And logs and monitor here, just to feed. So this is just our network feed first, you can see that there is a checking in process with this update of the network feed, and it will actually list the participating ranges and domains in that as well. So if you want to poke through it here rather than the CLI, you can. One thing you'll see here, this was a test from earlier today. You can see if we're not able to talk to network feed, we will get alerts. Not as critical as the CloudGuard controller, but that is something that you'll see in that note. And then with these, simple CloudGuard controller here, actually we'll go to the Azure one. So this was a mapping of the data center object here. As you can see, it does it very much cadence. Yeah, took 15 seconds. Next mapping is 30 seconds, and gives you that information. So as you start to see failures on this, you can also troubleshoot or go into detail as such. One last time, just for fun. Yeah, this does usually update with this. It's probably the nature of my lab right now, but there is ways of confirming that those objects are in there, which is here, which is not always ideal, but yeah, you will see that populate. Once again, nature of the lab demo. But yeah, that being said, that's all for me. Wanted to share that with you as far as data center objects. There's a lot of resources out there. As I mentioned, there is that kind of deep dive. CloudGuard is something that is included on all firewalls. It's there, it's ready to use. You'll see those objects, and pretty much the CloudGuard controller admin guide and our regular RD120 admin guide details a lot of this information as far as what we have here. So that being said, want to thank you, and I'll leave it open if we have any time for any questions.
Yeah, we have a few questions there, Eric.
Okay.
The first is, how long does it take to appear, example, creating a container with an existing label in Kubernetes to firewall and forcing traffic from that new container with the labels?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, it's 30 seconds, the check-in process from the management controller, the checkpoint management controller to the Kubernetes environment. So I usually want to have like 15 seconds past that for, a little bit of extra, bringing in the resources and enforcing it. But, once again, if you are creating a new container and it's a new object that you don't already have defined in a current policy, you will still need to add that object. So, for instance, I've got this tag that I'm using, but if I want to, use an entirely different type of container, I will have to go into, I'm just using the Azure one, but any type of environment and say, I've got a new network security group that I want to enforce. So I'd have to go in and do this. But if you already have those established objects, then it's just, the amount of time it takes for the check-in and processing of that.
So the next question was, you mentioned 2 blades are required for data center objects. I only see identity awareness blade in my gateway cluster object.
Perfect. Yeah. So the identity awareness a web API is a function of that. So if we go into, I'm going into my object here. So under identity awareness, once you have it enabled, you'll have this option, and then you'll have to make sure that the identity web API is enabled. So once you enable, the blade for identity awareness, you'll have this option, and then this is what's going to have to be checked. It's not checked by default, so this is just the component of it.
Sounds good. And what happens if your data center gets disconnected? I think you covered this. But
yeah. Basically, since we're using the identity awareness, there is a 7-day, kind of window where it'll still have those networks for authentication. So like, here's that example. You can see when it's connected to next re-authentication. So it'll sit in there for, 7 days. Once it does, this will essentially, grow, scale, and time out. But at this point, you should have some mechanisms in place. I didn't show you here. If we go into the management components, you'll have logs in there, but in the CloudGuard IRT containers, you can see the connected data centers and assets. We do have some of our play blocks that integrate IoT, But with my lab, you can see we've got import objects controller. It's currently connected, so it'll show you. So if it is disconnected, you will get an alert that your data center can't be reached from here also.
And I think the only other one was, will this be posted? Yes, this should be posted under the Tips and Tricks YouTube channel. I think that's all the questions, Eric. Thank you for your presentation. We will send a follow-up email with reference content and the recording link. Our next webinar will be in 2 weeks. You will see the invitation soon. Thank you for joining, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody.